Hey everyone, lately I've been using my XY a lot, and I'm working on a cover of one of my favorite songs of all time, Silver by Yesu. And I am going to go ahead and share what I've learned about the mixer because not all of it is straightforward and not all of it works as you might expect it or hope it to. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the mixer mode by pressing this button. There are 4 pages here, but I'm only going to be talking about the one that you access through M1. I'm not going to be looking at the EQ, I'm not going to be looking at the saturator, and I'm not going to be looking at the compressor/drive stuff. If you're familiar with the OPZ, this mixer page gives us the same 4 parameters as the last page of any OPZ audio track. So that's going to be FX Send 1, FX Send 2, pan, and then volume. Okay, so I'm going to open up the second pattern of the song, and then I'm going to open up the mixer, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. So some of the basic functions here are, if I'm playing, I can hold down one track and solo that track, or whichever other tracks I'm holding down. I can also, if I want, adjust a parameter on all of those tracks at once. That only works for instrument tracks, though. And similarly, I can control FX. Like I mentioned, I can control FX1 send, which is distortion on this. I can control FX2 send, which is reverb. I can control panning, and I can bring it back by clicking the third encoder down. And I can control volume. So that's most of what I'm going to be talking about, is muting tracks and controlling the volume, because it doesn't always work as you might expect it. Let's just start off with maybe the easiest and most straightforward example here. So let's just show a smooth fade in for the guitar. So this track. We'll fade this in. And you have to do this, well, I would say the easiest way to do this is from the mixer screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm on the right track. I'm on track 7, which again, I can check by just soloing it. And what I'll do is I'm going to hold down this step and I'm going to parameter lock the volume to 0. Up here, I'm going to parameter lock the volume all the way up. Now what this is going to do is it's going to be at 0 all the way till this last step. So I'm going to have to open up the bar menu to smooth that out. And I can either hold down bar and adjust this 4th encoder, or hold shift and tap bar, and now I'm going to adjust this 4th encoder. If I turn it here, we're going to be able to see a gradual fade in the entire time, from here over to the 16th step. It's going to get to maximum volume by the time the 16th step begins, which is kind of unfortunate, but you can still do some fade-ins here. It's getting louder. One sort of unfortunate thing is that this last step doesn't look ahead to the first step. So even if I have it maybe peak right here, it's not going to go back down in anticipation of this first step. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing right now, but I just wanted to at least mention that as a limitation. If we change the shape to being about halfway, what's going to happen is it's going to be silent for this first half, and then we'll see it start to go up once it reaches about this step or so. There we go. And it's going to move a bit faster to get to its target value. So that's the straightforward part. Let's get weird with this now. So let's talk about the different ways of muting a track, because there's some important differences here. So let's say that we stick with this guitar track and let's mute it. Well, first I'm going to clear the parameters that I just put down on here by holding bar and then holding down M2, which will clear the parameters. So now that is still at the very top. So what I want to demonstrate here is the difference between an audio mute and a sequencer mute, which has changed a bit from OPZ. So here we go. The easiest and most simple way of muting something is just by turning the 4th encoder all the way down. Now we don't hear anything. It's not sending to the effects or anything like that. If I play notes here, you don't hear them at all. And that makes a bit of sense, right? One downside is that this is saved to the pattern, whereas the other type of mute I'm about to show gets saved to the scene. So you only get 9 patterns per track, so you can only make 9 specific adjustments to the volume, FX sends, and panning, but you can have up to 99 kind of sets of mute groups, basically. Each scene can have its own set of what I'm going to call sequencer mutes. And when I say sequencer mute, I'm going to, just for demonstration, turn this all the way back up. If I click this, if I hit the fourth encoder down, it's going to ignore all these notes. It's not going to send it out through MIDI. Whereas if I had the volume all the way down, it's still going to send out the MIDI notes, right? And it's going to still send all these notes to a MIDI sequencer or whatever other MIDI device if I have this set up that way. But if I mute it like this, it's going to skip these notes. It won't play it. We won't hear that guitar part at all. But here's the weird part. Beautiful, right? My point there was just to demonstrate that it's still, you could still hear the audio. I can still hear I can still hear all those sends, etc. Even though this is like scratched out as though it's muted. So that is a big difference that you may not expect, which is this type of muting, the sequence muting, as I'm calling it. You could still play MIDI notes and record them onto here. You can still hear notes that you play just on this active track, but you absolutely cannot send MIDI out from these sequence notes. I haven't tried to see if it'll echo out. That's a different video. But my point is that there's two different types of mutes here. There are a couple other ways that you can get to this type of muting without having to press this down. You can, from the mixer screen or the arranger screen, you can hold shift, same thing. And these are the ones that also, like I said, get saved with each scene instead of each pattern. Same thing with the instrument tracks. You can hold shift from here, or you can hold down the instrument track itself to mute or unmute. Same thing with the aux tracks, but these are a little bit funkier. But there's something kind of cool that you can do with these sequencer mutes. Because it's saved to the pattern or to the scene and not to the pattern, that means that we can selectively mute our punch-in effects. So let's say that I want to have the drums be, oops, sorry, wrong track. Punch-in effects are on this track. If I want to mute the drums for this first part here, let's just make this short. If I mute that, I won't get that effect. So this just allows a little bit more variation without needing to change any patterns, and instead just being able to change the mutes that are enabled during a certain scene. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, of course, one of my favorites, step components. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and I just want to mute everything except for that track. And now that we've got it all muted but that track, I'm going to do just a fade in, and it's only going to last for this long, and that's fine. If I wanted a different type of fade in that lasts a little longer, I might do it on like maybe an effects track that this sends to. I don't know. That's kind of a different topic though. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this be quiet, and we're going to fade it in to right there. I'm going to hold shift, tap bar, increases fourth encoder, and now it should smoothly increase the volume. Now, something I wasn't expecting is, let me add a skip parameter. So that means that it's not going to apply those parameter locks the first pass, but it will on the second. But this doesn't work exactly as I was expecting it to work. It's still going to move the value during these two steps. Which is just really unexpected for me. But it does mean that you can do things like, here, let me just remove those. It does mean that you can do things like, what if we only want that fade in to happen on the fourth time? So to make sure that we don't have too much weirdness, let's move this to about here. 2, 3. So that might seem kind of silly. Let's change this to being here and change this to being all the way up. So let's actually do this fade in again. Here we go. So it's going to stay the same volume for 3, and then on the fourth pass, it's going to gradually fade in or increase in volume. The difference wasn't dramatic, but I still found that to be pretty interesting and kind of a cool way that you might be able to use this, when you're actually making a song or something like that. One more quick note before I close this out, and that is if I'm looking at one of the aux tracks and then I decide, I want to change the panning of the incoming audio. If I open up the mixer, by default, it's going to take me right back to my instrument tracks. I have to press mixer a second time to have it open up this track now. So that's something that's really confused me a lot. And that's the same case with the arranger mode. If you're already looking at the aux tracks and go into arranger mode, it takes you back to the instrument tracks. So I found that to be a bit confusing, but I'm starting to get used to it. And overall, I find the mixer to be pretty helpful, but still a little bit confusing. So hopefully this answers some of your questions and makes it a little bit easier to use. Please let me know if you have any other questions, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.